I think we're live. Hi, everybody.
Yes, we're live.
We're live.
So hi, I'm Dr. Keri Orange, and this is Amy Pacifico, and welcome to Successful Integration of ELA and Social Studies using Culturally Diverse Texts.
So I'm Amy Pacifico. I have been working in West Orange for the past 29 years. How did that happen?
I don't know, you're just 25 years old.
I know. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I currently teach 5th grade ELA. I have 3 kids and I love my job. Love working with this girl. She's great.
And I'm Dr. Keri Orange, and I teach social studies, and sometimes I team teach with Amy. I've been teaching for 22 years, and I have a doctorate in education, and I love teaching with this professional right here. She makes teaching with her every day so much fun. So we're going to talk to you about some things that we did this year with social studies and ELA and integrating both subjects and use a lot of culturally diverse texts to make for a broader experience for our students. So Amy's going to start first.
So I think the first thing we need to talk about before we get into how we integrated ELA and social studies is this whole idea of creating a culture of reading in our classroom. Thinking about the space that we use, our classroom libraries. I think it's really important. So about 5 years ago, I would walk into my classroom every morning and I would turn on the light and I would see a sea of desks. Mm-hmm. And I just got this kind of feeling in my stomach. My God, do we really want to spend the whole day here? And then I'm like, well, do the kids really, when they walk in every day, is this a place that they want to spend every day? And around the same time, I read an article on Edutopia by Kayla Deltzer of Top Dog Teaching. And she talked about how our classrooms should be more like Starbucks, a place where we could work and study and collaborate. And that got me thinking, because I think that rows of desks just doesn't create that space where we want to spend time and read and study. So from then, I made it a mission to kind of change things around. I also realized that teaching ELA has to be not only about the environment, but it has to be a place where the message to our students is reading is our life. And books are the most important thing here, other than or along with the relationships that we're going to create with each other through this shared love of reading. Another article that I read by Eric Scheninger and Tom Murray, also on Edutopia, I just thought this was great. It was about flexible seating, and they say if the space doesn't match the desired learning pedagogy, then it will hinder student outcomes. So if our spaces aren't a place where we are kind of teaching what we profess, then the kids, it's not going to be as beneficial to our students. So now I'm very in tune with how I create the learning space in my classroom, where I can leverage the power of reading, but also the power of technology. So a little tour of my classroom. I put a few pictures up to share with you. So I designed my class for collaboration and relationship building. So I think the most important space in our room is that central gathering area. And that's an area where I have some large sofas, chairs, we have a carpet. That's where we gather for our mini lessons in both reading and writing and our classroom discussions. I also have a table, you can kind of see behind that, for small group work, and a high bar table also. You know, my girls go to college. Who knew that bed risers would be such an awesome thing to create these high bar tables with stools? So we also have a high bar table where kids like to sit and have book clubs, or we can meet for small group work. Classroom library. So I have a huge classroom library. Of course, 29 years, you tend to get a lot of books. But I'm very mindful about my book displays. because I just don't think a library is good enough. I think we need to create displays that also entice reading. So I think about, well, what unit are we on in ELA? What unit are we on in social studies? So I specifically choose books according to those units.
Yep.
I also choose books that are, hot at the time with our students, the ones that kids would like. I make sure that my book displays are culturally diverse and attract all my students. And of course, we have to have our display for books written by Mark and Scott Kelly, our own school astronauts, and also our ever popular Marley Diaz, our own West Orange. Marley Gets It Done. So those are just some examples of how I display books. I have a library full of books that the kids actually organized, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And I think it's important to note, I do not level my books. I just feel like the students need choice. And I feel like even those higher level readers are missing out. So if you label a kid, say, I don't know, W, and they kind of just stick to those books, they're missing out on so many good books. I don't know, Bridge to Terabithia, which is level S or T. So I think it kind of hinders both sides. So I have a non-leveled library. Also, as part of my room are anchor charts, and two of my favorite anchor charts. One, I think, was based on the book Disrupting Thinking by Kylene Beers and Robert Probst. That is our book Head Heart reading. And that really just reminds kids about to understand that reading changes us. We find ourselves in stories, that books affect us and that we can learn from them. Also this year, which I was so excited about, is our think wall. So for each unit, I just left a whiteboard totally clear. And that think wall allows students to process what they learn throughout our units. So for instance, they add pictures or quotes from stories, one-liners, signposts. Of course, their hashtags about reading are the most popular. But when you look at it, it really shows the way it shows their thinking across a unit. And I think, I don't know, I started it this year. I just thought it was really powerful. Sorry, and I forgot to mention The Art of Comprehension, which I also strongly recommend everybody read, and that's the Access Lenses, which have really been a game changer for us this year. It's written by Trevor Bryan, and that I think really gives the kids an opportunity to think about how we analyze text, and it gives them those lenses to look at. And
pictures. They did it a lot. In social studies.
Images. Yeah. I think the final part about my room and my library is that it is kid-centered and kid-created. So here's some examples. Well, you're going to hear from one of our class librarians. The kids are in charge of organizing the books, returning the books. We have sign-up sheets. So for instance, Alan Gratz happened to be a very popular author this year. So we have kids, if they've read a book and it's a very popular book, they create these sign-up sheets so we can keep track of who has them and who gets the books next. It alleviates some fighting over books. We post our weekly reading goals. And as you can see in the other picture, we found out that kids, while they're reading, they want to have a book in the wings. So they're allowed to, so my students came up with the idea to create this little reserved section. So if there's a book that you find that you want to keep on reserve, you put your name on that stick note, and then you can reserve your book there for when you're done. We also have First Chapter Fridays, which have become very popular this year. And those are just kind of student book talks where they tell about the book, and then it entices other kids to want to read the same books. So that's been great this year. Yeah. So now I guess we want to great to hear from us, but we'd like to share with you, what do the kids think about how reading maybe has changed for them this year, or how the atmosphere kind of affects them. So here we have our two friends.
Hi, my name is Taylor, and reading has definitely changed for me this year a lot because I feel like there's more of a variety of books that we have, and there are much more than in previous years that we have in our classroom library. Because before it was like two cases of not cases, but like sets of books, I guess you could say. And it was very boring. There was a very limited amount, and you just felt like you were, like I said, limited to how much you could read. But this year we have so much more, and it really gives me so much to choose from, and so much. And I really want to read now, so I can read like so many, because there's so much of a variety of books that I can choose from. And also now I feel like I can learn more from fiction books than last year, because last year fiction books are more like fantasy or things that were made up, not really like actually real. But this year I find that there are more books of like realistic fiction and historical fiction, and that really makes me want to learn more while still reading a story that may not be real, but something that actually happened, like in the book Refugee, things that actually happened. But I think that it really changed my passion for reading, because now I just want to like read more, because there's so many different things, not just the same exact thing every single time. And I find that I enjoy books more, like I would rate them higher like on my reading log than last year, because I feel like there's more diversity in the books that make me really enjoy them, learning about different things, like I previously said, and just more fun reading it to me this year. And also the atmosphere of our ELA classroom is very inviting and kid-friendly, and like Ms. Pacifico said, kid-based and kid-centered. And I like that because it's very inviting for a kid to come in and sit down and just jump right into their book to read for the first couple minutes of class. And a lot of things kids have created in this in our classroom, like the classroom library. I helped with some of my other friends to put the books up on the shelves, and the way that we organized it is also easy to navigate for kids, because before we got this new like furniture and stuff, there were just like these small cases of books with much more than like one topic in one of the bins or boxes, and it was very hard to like pick out what book you would want, because it's not really like organized in a way that makes it easy to look at. So I like how it's like that this year. And also the way it's not just like one like section centered around one topic, not like nonfiction just in one section. It's like nonfiction horses, nonfiction like dogs, just like nonfiction like everything in like a different section. So it's much more easy to read and stuff like that. And also in some other pictures you can see painted on the wall.
I forgot about that.
There's a painting the mural that me and my friends did. And we were originally thinking of doing it somewhere else, but then Ms. Pacifico wanted us to do it in her room, and we were happy to do that because it was created by us, not by one of the adults that just like painted it. It's not like the boring white wall anymore. It's more of like it has the tree, and it says today a leader, tomorrow. No, today a reader, tomorrow a leader. And I really like how it's like that.
Me too.
It's amazing. Yeah, they did a great job.
Hi, I'm Cameron. Reading this year has changed a lot. The environment is more welcoming, books are more diverse. Last year in 4th grade, the environment wasn't as welcoming, the books weren't as diverse. They were not capturing, the books were not capturing at all. They didn't capture me. I dreaded reading because we had to pick from certain baskets that were our number or letter. It was a color. Yeah, and there was like some book that I wanted to read, but then there was either higher or lower. And then a way that so teachers can make sure kids also get to choose their books is by doing a Google form, which is what I did for our class. So what I did is I made a Google form, and then students will fill them out. And then the Google form would ask what the student's name is, the title of the book that they want for the classroom, the author of the book, and a reason why, which also is a way that students can practice writing. And after getting these results, teachers, if they ever want to get another book from the library, they can choose one of the books randomly or read through the opinions and see which one would be best.
Okay. Cool. Great. So just, I guess, also to point out, we get a lot of our books from Scholastic. We use our points. Of course, I'm older now and my kids are older. So I also invite friends of mine, if they have younger kids, I get a lot of book donations from them. So that's another way to build my library. And also kids. I found that when they have this passion for reading and so if their parents take them out and buy a book and they love it, they also often donate it to our classroom library because they know that possibly the students next year would want to read the same books. So I think that kind of giving back atmosphere helps teachers build libraries.
And if I can jump in, we are fortunate that every year when we have the Scholastic book sale, the PTA moms, they run it. And a lot of times we're able to have a wish list. And our parents are so generous. Like 100% of my books, like usually mine are social studies based, and I'm sure Amy gets a bunch of different books. And a lot of times the parents and the students buy books and donate them also to our classroom library. So that helps a great deal.
Yeah, good point. So we'd love to hear from you. If you could maybe tweet and share a way that you create a culture of reading, in your classroom, we'd love to share some ideas here to add to what we've shared with you today. All right. So the final way that we create this culture of reading in our classroom is through a shared reading experience. And I think probably that's, the most powerful thing.
She's emotionally choked up right
now. But yeah, the most powerful thing we do, I think, during the year is participation in the Global Read Aloud. The Global Read Aloud was founded by Pernille Ripp, who I also follow. And I think she's been a big inspiration for me as far as allowing student choice and kind of how we teach reading. So she created, which many of you might be familiar with, this Global Read Aloud, where students all around the world read the same text. So last year we read A Long Walk to Water. This year we read Refugee. And it really builds our reading community in the very beginning of the year. We use that text. We are still talking about Refugee.
Still talking about it.
But it serves as our year-long mentor text. So during that time, I use that text for mini lessons. We talk about, characters, theme, plot, all of the things that you would normally teach in the beginning of the year. We teach through that Global Read Aloud, through Refugee. This year, we also used it as a writing mentor text. And the kids actually wrote as if they were Alan Gratz. So thank you, Alan Gratz, because now we have a lot of kids that are modeling your writing style, and they were very inspired by you. But I guess the most important thing, too, that happened this year with us was this big connection with social studies. So the best part of the day, I think, was when Keri came racing into my classroom. Oh my gosh, did you read the next chapter?
Yes.
And like that enthusiasm that we shared, so rubbed off on the kids, and we just had so much fun.
Yeah,
reading
to the point that they'd be like, "Oh, what did you read?" And they wanted me to like cheat and tell them what happened next. And I'm like, "No, you have to read it."
Yeah,
it's a very powerful book. Very powerful book.
So she's going to talk to you a little bit now about kind of how that all came about and what we did.
So creating a culture of inquiry and research in social studies. So a little bit of background. I love teaching science. I used to teach science a lot. And I was very much not a social studies person. And, you know, teaching 4th and 5th grade social studies, traveling a little bit, like I went to Williamsburg last year to Jamestown and collecting all this evidence and pictures. And so they made the Jamestown experience, when I'm teaching now, really like much richer. So with refugee, 2 years ago when I taught 5th grade with Amy, they read PAX. And I didn't jump on the bandwagon, didn't realize the power of the global read aloud. And I've always been interested in trying to integrate the two, social studies and language arts literacy. And so I did go in and listen to them read PAX. But this year, for whatever reason, refugee just happened to fit into the unit of study that we were doing at the time, which was thinking like a historian. So in our 5th grade units of study, we have thinking like a geographer, and then the next one is thinking like a historian. So with, you know, demonstrate historical thinking skills and evaluate historical sources. They talk about primary and secondary resources, apply the lessons of the past and the patterns in history to better understand other historical current events and issues. And refugee did that because it talks about 3 characters, one who's in Nazi Germany, one who's in Miami, leaving Cuba, heading to Miami in the 1990s, which I remember coming up, and then the current issue with Syrian refugees. So, you know, this resonated with the kids. They see what's going on today. But then he also read this book and looked at these occurrences that happened in the past and seeing how, although times change, there's still some things that's happening in history that's still reoccurring, especially when you're talking about people in power who tend to abuse their power. And these are some of the things that came out in discussions reading refugee. Information skills, how it can help you learn about social studies and history. And again, the analysis of primary and secondary sources. So with reading refugee, we were able to do a study. The students would talk about the characters. How were the characters the same? Isabel and Mahmoud and Joseph, how were they the same? And what were the themes? And they talked about that a lot in ELA. But in social studies, we came up with this dictator study. You know, one day, just out of the clear blue, one of the students is like, you know, we never talk about the reason why, like the overall reason. We don't talk about Hitler. We didn't talk about Bashir al-Assad. We didn't talk about Castro. So this led us into doing a study of the 3 dictators and, you know, using primary and secondary resources. So we were able to connect the whole thinking like a historian unit of study and the goals and connected to refugee and made a deeper, richer reading experience for the students. They were able to go to Amy's class and discuss, oh, you know, we read about this, or we discussed this with Dr. Orange, because I would read a couple of chapters also in social studies class. And then they would come back from ELA and say, oh, we talked about this with Mrs. Pacifico. So that made for a richer experience. To give you some examples of some of the things that they did, some student work, when they did do the study, they had they used technology to develop some quotes. They used Google Slides. So here's like a cover slide where they talked about the 3 dictators, and they had quotes. And so they discussed, you know, the things that Hitler said, or Assad said, or Castro said about being in power, or doing their regimes, and were able to dig in deep and talk about what were some of these things that they said and what did these things mean. And so not only do we have the historical analysis, but they're also analyzing language, which is something they can take back to Amy's class. You know, when you talk about the access lens with the pictures, we're also now using quotes and looking at these through a different lens and analyzing what these quotes actually mean. And it resonated with the kids. Another example of student work, another one was the evil dictator. They titled it Evil Dictator, like twirling your mustache. So they did, this was an excellent one. They had, we used Padlet, which is something that's like a digital bulletin board. And they had the introduction, and they talked about Adolf Hitler and Fidel Castro and Bashir al-Assad. And they had details about their lives and that background and their upbringing. What you don't see on the slide, there's similarities, and they talked about how they were the same. They all took away people's rights. They all started wars, or They all, and then they talked about the other things, that they were intelligent men. They all went to college and graduated.
Yeah.
But then they also talked about the differences. Is something that's one thing you don't see. And then because we were still sticking to the thinking like a historian, they had to leave resources. So they had to tell me where they got the resources from, their sources from, where the primary, and they had to identify whether they were primary sources or secondary sources. So it was a really powerful experience. And I think because I really engaged in this book with them, it made for a deeper learning experience for them as well. And the kids were totally excited because I was excited. Some other examples of tech integration that we did use, besides Padlet, like Cameron spoke earlier, you use Google Forms. They use Google Slides to do some presentations. Seesaw and Flipgrid allows them to do some video representation. Google Hangouts, Google Classroom. I might post a quote in Google Classroom and have them, analyze this quote and tell me what you think it means, and then they would have a running stream and they could respond to each other's answers.
I think that's so important. Like you just said, the post in Classroom or even on a Padlet, where in the past, when you hand out a worksheet and a kid writes a response, well, who sees it? We do. Right. And it really, I just don't think it's as meaningful for them.
Right.
But when they're sharing on a Padlet, they're sharing ideas.
Yes.
And those, kids that are maybe slower to respond or struggling a little, now they also have mentors there.
So other people's ideas.
Yeah, to inspire them. So I feel like it ups their writing because what they share is, they know they have an audience, right? And I think it just inspires like struggling ones who are having trouble getting started.
Also an example of how you use like social media sometimes catches a bad break because of the texting and things. So it's a good example of how students are using language written form and technology in a positive way, and helping to reinforce a positive and the accurate use of language. So I think that's also something that's worth mentioning. If you look at another example, when they did the primary sources and first person accounts, we were lucky enough to have a primary source come in, Senor Lemus, and he was a Cuban refugee. And he came in, and this was extremely, I was brought to tears. The principal was brought to tears. Dr. Joe likes to cry a lot anyway, but, it was very moving how he came in and discussed what he went through leaving Cuba. And what happened was we were able to, he was in Mrs. Pacifico's room, and we were able to, video him out to other schools. So if you see, we had Kelly, our school, and we had kids talk about it. And in Mount Pleasant, Redwood, Gregory, and Washington were able to watch him speak. We had a translator, his niece, Ms. Navoa works at our school, and she came in and did the translation from it. It was such a powerful moment. And so here we have an example in the human flesh of a primary source in a first person account. And what was really interesting, and I want to note, is that his journey to Miami or to America was very similar to Isabel in the story Refugee. So you could hear the gasp as he was speaking, because, oh my God, it's just like Isabel. Even I was like overcome about the how similar it was to the text, to the book. So I think that Refugee, just that example of it, I'm looking forward to this year's Global Read Aloud. But this is an example of how you can take the text and, collaborate with your colleague and work on trying to bring both together to make for a richer and deeper learning experience. And with that being said, we have
from our friends
more students who are going to talk about how this Global Read Aloud and the experience in social studies and language arts literacy made for a richer experience for them. So, ladies.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. And the refugee experience for me was very eye-opening. It opened me up to what else was going on in the world, and I think that is very important to educate kids on what's happening, especially with right now. And I was very interested to hear about how people lived in the 1930s and the 1950s and in 2015. And honestly, I was thinking about it, and I was like, if you really think about it, it still happens today, even in 2019. And so it really hits you, and you start to think about all angles, which I think really helped when we were reading it in both social studies and ELA. And we were able to make connections that if we read it in one class, we normally wouldn't be able to make. And I think the social studies aspect of it, we really looked at like the dictators' lives and the history of it. And in ELA, we looked at the character traits of the characters and their actions and what that might have meant. And by doing that, we made connections in both classes, and it was like really interesting. And so I was just really interested in the book based on like what we were doing, like going back and forth to classes and talking about that. Compared to previous years when we would just read books in one class and we wouldn't be able to have that connection. And I think that was very important, and I really loved that experience.
Good, thank you.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and I'm part of the Kelly Refugee Team. So the Kelly Refugee Team started from the book Refugee, which was by the amazing author Alan Gratz. We read this book for the Global Read Aloud, where all the fifth graders came together and read this outstanding story. To quickly summarize the whole thing up, there are 3 refugees, 3 dictators, and they're all in 3 different situations. Knowing that there were refugees out there risking their lives just to get to a safer place, while we just sat around and watched TV, we just knew we had to do something. So we created this team to help refugees. Wait, who's we? Oh, my friends Nicole and Taylor. We all had empathy. We felt that we had to do something about the situation, and so we did. Even though all these characters are fake, their stories are real situations. And because of that, we are currently working on a fundraiser. We have raised about $416 from our school. Thanks, Kelly. With the money we collected, we are going to send it to an organization called Choose Love, which specifically helps Syrian refugees. We hope that our fundraiser has inspired others to do the same, or even something that's even better. As you can see, books create empathy, and this book was culturally diverse, which definitely made a difference in my life and, to my understanding, many others.
Good. So that's a mic drop. We're done, right?
I know, right? Finished. No,
that's pretty much it. No, but yeah, thank you. And if you want to hear more about using books to kind of inspire kids to move towards social action projects, be sure to check out the closing speech today with some of our amazing colleagues that are going to talk a little bit about that and the positive uses of social media. So they don't miss them today at the end of the day. All right, so just to share with you, we created like a framework, a simple framework where kind of just to help you think about how this would go. So if you think about your units of study in ELA and kind of match them up with some units of study in social studies, you can then kind of come together to pick some books that would match both units.
Right.
So you have.
So like even as I stated earlier, with the examples we used, Fiction Global Read Aloud, Refugee was the book that we used this year. So it fit into thinking like a historian and thinking like a geographer. I spoke to about how they were able to, use the historical analysis, primary sources and secondary sources to do the dictator study. But we also had a huge map, and I wish we had a picture to show you, but we also had a huge map where they charted the course of Isabel's journey and Joseph's journeys and Mahmoud's journey. And they were able to chart and even measure, figure out the mileage. And this all fit into the think of like a geographer unit. Another example, like the American Revolution, hopefully we get to it this year. It's running out of time at testing. But she would be able to study, do historical literature, and I will do the American Revolution, and there's some books that we could possibly read together that I'm sure Amy would put in her class library, and that I could possibly read aloud with the students as well, to help the students be more engaged and have a deeper, richer learning experience. Is my desire, and it's really, really difficult to do, to have more of an alignment with social studies and ELA. I'm working on that now as I'm helping to revise some of the social studies curriculum, to try and get the two to meet, you know, like currently I just finished Early Explorers, and how do I fit that into what Amy is doing in the classroom? So sometimes it takes a lot of planning and discussion, and it's not going to happen overnight. It could take a year or two to try and make the units and the text align so that you can have the integration of ELA and social studies.
So here's a few more examples that we came up with.
Okay.
All right.
So now
we'd love to invite you to share any ideas that you have, where you could think of ways that you could collaborate between ELA and social studies and your units of study.
Yes.
So we'd love to hear from you. So thank you.
And I'm looking, I don't see anything yet. So let's get on it. So finally, you know, how does this all work? Collaboration and communication between teachers. You know, I have to say, I'm fortunate enough today. You know, I've been working with Amy since I walked in the door at Kelly Elementary School, formerly Pleasantdale. And, you know, she's a phenomenal teacher. So as a person who was a voracious reader when I was a child, working with someone who loves to read herself, it just, you know, that shared passion for reading. You know, I mean, I read A Long Walk to Water, which is another book that we recommend. And just, you know, she said, you have to read it. And I remember I got to the end of the book and I would run into a room like, oh my God. And so that enthusiasm and that shared passion is infectious and drives us to want to sit and collaborate and try and come up with ways to not only just, you know, engage each other, but the students as well. And when they see that we're enthusiastic and passionate, then they're like, oh, okay, you know, we recommend books. And I know Amy gets book recommendations from students all the time. And I don't know how she keeps up with them, because they're like, Mrs. Pacifico. And I literally see it happening. Oh, you have to read this book. And she'll say, okay, put it on my desk, or put a Post-it. And it's like a stack of books. And I'm like, when do you have time to do all this? But they see that we're enthusiastic about reading. So then they're enthusiastic. And of course, it makes us want to collaborate. And it's not even just with me. We have a teacher, Kelly Clancy, who's an inclusion teacher, and Kelly comes in every morning and sits with Amy, and they sit and they try to figure out ways to even help those students who might have some difficulties, and they do it every day. And I think it's amazing, that dedication and that passion to do that.
But it's also that mindset and that flexibility. You know, we're not, you know, tunnel vision. We also make it very, it's very important that we also go by what the kids want.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned when you know, that kind of dictator study came out of the blue. Well, because we went on what the kids wanted to do. I think, you know, we need to think about when we're teaching units, what would the kids be engaged in? What would they be interested in? It's not about our books and our book choices, but just to follow their interest and follow their lead.
It's emergent, because after she finished Refugee, they became so engaged in World War II. And the next thing you know, they were reading, like, inhaling all these books about World War II. And isn't that what education should truly be about? I mean, I'm not a traditional educator. I'm alternate route. I worked in corporate America. So to me, to see if a child is interested in something, you run with it. And Amy, you know, we are, you know, I shouldn't say this out loud, but we're renegades. We go against the grain, you know. So the kids, maybe there was a bunch of books they were supposed to read, but they were engaged in World War II. She ran with it and then brought all these books and placed them out on the tables, and they just got immersed in it. And then you should see that you can walk in a classroom, which never happens, in the morning, and you can hear a pin drop because everybody is in the book. And that's what it's supposed to be about. So that's speaking to that thinking outside the box. Like even with science, the kids, we're doing plant study. I'm like, what's the best way to learn about plants? Oh, let's grow some. So we're growing plants and starting a garden. And that's important, especially to me with ELA, trying to create readers. You have to be a renegade. You have to think about outside the box.
Yeah, because that whole World War II unit, that wasn't even kind of what I had planned my historical fiction unit to be about.
Not at all.
Well, not at all. But when I saw this like swell, I said, we got to go with it. So we went on, we ordered books, we got points, and we just kind of made it happen. So we'd like to leave you today with some final thoughts from our students. And we hope that you listen and take their messages to heart. So, final words to our friends out there.
right, so I'm Cameron again, in case you forgot.
Little-
The teachers out there, you should let the children or students in your class choose the books for your class library, or be able to do reports on anything they want. Teachers should also get books that are culturally diverse, but not from the past. When I read a Chinese book Front Desk by Kelly Yang, I was delighted to finally read a present tense Chinese book. Also to authors out there, when you make culturally diverse books, the book should be in present tense, unlike some Asian books which are about the past from up to 100 years ago. Hashtag thank you, Kelly Yang.
Kelly Yang, yes,
Kelly
of
Yang.
course. Okay.
So my final thoughts to teachers out there are when you're building a class library for any subject really like social studies and ELA, you want to think about it from a kid's point of view, not so much from a teacher's point of view, because the teachers are, the students are the ones who are going to mostly be reading the books. Well, like you read the books too, but they're going to be the ones who are who are going to read the books more. They're going to look at it, and they're the ones who don't know what's like in there. They want to explore it. But you don't want it to be boring, because then they'll lose a passion for reading or not even get a passion for reading. So it's important to make sure that you have books that a kid would want. And like Ms. Pacifico does, not putting like levels on the baskets makes it more free to kids to choose what they want. Because sometimes I feel like kids would feel bad if they couldn't choose a book for a basket that was higher or lower, and some other books looked interesting to them, but they couldn't read it because it wasn't on their level. So I like how we're free to like explore. And then with the writing, you should make sure that your students are enjoying the unit, like how Ms. Pacifico and Dr. Orange were just talking about. They had to like go like outside of their lesson plan because they saw that we really liked it. Because if your students don't like it, then it won't be fun for them, and it probably won't be fun for you either. So you just want to make sure that your students are engaged in what they're learning. And one last thing, teachers, you should be more like Ms. Pacifico and Dr. Orange, because they are so great.
You didn't try to say that.
I didn't tell her to say that.
She did.
Okay. So I would say to teachers that they need to make their rooms more comfortable and more welcoming for students and for themselves. I think in more classrooms need to be a space where students want to come and learn and get educated and don't feel like it has to be a chore to go to school. I think a lot of people focus on making the classroom all about work and not having fun, but that's exactly what it should be, having fun while learning and making it like a positive area for people to want to come. And I think right now is a good time to do this because students have such a voice in their education, and I think it's a big step since like years ago. Like a lot of students now, like before you guys are saying, like you guys are making murals in the classroom and designing libraries, and that's like a really big step. And I think that's an important thing to do in classrooms.
Thank you.
To all the teachers out there who are listening right now, I think that you should think of a library from a student's perspective. Try to look at it this way: you're in a library full of books, but the thing is, as a student, you like that there's so many books in here to read, but once you get a hold of them, you really don't enjoy them as much as you nearly wanted to. So you keep on going to other books that you want to read, but they're not the ones that it's not your type. So now as your regular self-teachers, you now know what students think sometimes. The more enjoyable the students' books are, the more passionate they are in reading. And don't you want that for your students? So hopefully you'll think out of the box, and also you'll consider that idea.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you for
Everyone.
tuning in today. We also want to give a shout out to our tech mentor and coach, Diana DaCosta, for helping us and inspiring us every day in West Orange. And also,
Dr. Joanne Flower, our principal and leader at Kelly Elementary School. Thank you so much. Follow us, hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering, hashtag World to World. And I'm at Dr. Keri Orange, and Amy's at Amy Pacifico.
A Pacifico 3.
Okay. On Twitter.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. Say bye, everybody. Bye.